Hi, I'm James Moneypenny and welcome to my expedition preparation video. If you're watching this, then hopefully I am your expedition leader. And the purpose of this video is really to give you some useful information in the build-up for your trip. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk about some stuff that you should have done already pre-expedition, and also about forms that are available to you, health and hygiene, security, things to expect when on expedition, give you some tips, and then we'll talk about the last few things before you get on the plane. So first of all then, I work as a freelance outdoor instructor and an expedition leader. I've been working in the outdoor industry for about 8 years. I also have my own outdoor company based in the UK called Gibbon Adventures. My main passions are rock climbing, mountaineering, kayaking and paragliding. I've worked as a freelance expedition leader for about 4 or 5 years, and I've run 8 expeditions so far as of November 2014. And I have quite a lot of developing world travel experience within South America and Central and Southeast Asia. My role as expedition leader is essentially to keep everyone on the expedition safe and also to develop you guys, the participants. How do I keep it safe? Well, I'll be working within all of the operating procedures and risk assessments. Obviously, I've just mentioned that I've got a fair bit of expedition experience. It has a proven safety and backup system, which includes an operations centre back in the UK, in-country agents, as well as emergency communication devices that we'll be carrying. In terms of development then, this really is your expedition, and the idea behind it is that you'll be taking responsibility for a lot of the things that go on to organise and run the trip. So for example, each one of you will be taking responsibility for, say for example, transport, accommodation, managing your own money, cooking your food, and many other roles that I'm going to go into later on within this video. Okay, so some pre-expedition stuff that hopefully you've already sorted out. You should have looked into what vaccinations and anti-malarials you may or may not need, and the best place to go to get advice and get that done is book an appointment with your GP or practice nurse. Also, kit. You should have had a good look through the kit list, and hopefully your kit is all sorted. I could go into loads of depth there, but what I want you to do really is have a good look at the kit list. It's something where you could spend a lot of money, so my advice to you would be to save money where you can by really looking out for good deals. Personally, what I often do is try things on in shops and then shop online when I know my size and what fits me. You can also look for stores that maybe do a price match scheme, where they'll match a scheme of like an online discount, and of course borrowing from D&V departments within schools and friends and family where you can. Also on kit, it would be really good if everyone on the trip can turn up with a notepad. A5 is quite a good size, with a pen, and I actually recommend attaching your pen to your notepad so you can't lose it. And a cheap plastic watch with an alarm is also a must. If all your kit is coming to above 15 kgs, you've probably got too much. So have a look through and think about what is either not on the kit list or you have maybe too much of, because actually saving weight and every item, going for smaller items where possible, you can save a lot of weight. Bear in mind you will need room for group kit, so the group kit will probably be sent to your school within a kit bag, but your school support coordinator will have already told you about this. On your build-up day, you will have to organise splitting up the kit within your team, bearing in mind that the satellite phone and the emergency satellite beacon and the first aid kit and the medical boxes should go to your school leaders. The grab bag first aid kit, it's normally a red waterproof bag, should obviously come on the flight, so in your hand luggage. But bear in mind with all hand luggage, you want to make sure that you've got nothing sharp and nothing that's on the banned list when you go through security, such as pen knives, aerosols, liquids above 100 millilitres. So organise that on build-up day to make sure that you've not got that on your hand luggage. But all the rest of your group kit, you need to organise who's carrying what. Make sure you keep a list of who has got what, so we know when we're in country. That'll do. Okay, so in this part of the video I'm going to talk a lot about information that's normally covered in the build-up day. So it's particularly relevant if I'm meeting you in country. Even if we do have a build-up day though, it's still worth watching the video. And then towards the end of the video I'm going to go into some depth with the roles. If you're really tight for time, you can skip to just listening about your role, but I'd really recommend learning what's involved with all of the roles so that you appreciate what's involved with other people's tasks. Okay, so expedition health and hygiene. Staying hydrated is really important because on expedition you'll often be doing lots of physical activity, which can lead to dehydration. Hydration is all about the balance of water and electrolytes within your body. So you get electrolytes from food and obviously you get your water from your drink. So how do you tell when you're dehydrated? Well, your urine should be clear and copious and sort of straw coloured. And often if you're dehydrated you might get a headache, especially towards the front of your head. If you're particularly dehydrated you might feel dizzy and generally a bit lethargic and slow. So to prevent dehydration, it's a really good idea to always have your water bottle with you. So wherever you are on expedition, always keep your water bottle with you, as well as your water purification, so that you can always be drinking. It's good to drink little sips and often, as opposed to downing a load of water at once. Each day you'll have a buddy, and as part of that they can be your water buddy, so they can check your water intake. It's difficult to say an exact amount that you should be drinking because it depends on you, it depends on the heat, it depends on how much you're sweating. Food is fuel. You need to eat. On expedition you'll be doing lots of long days with lots of physical activity. If you don't meet your energy requirements, then slowly but surely you will start to feel worse and worse, and you won't be able to enjoy yourself, and potentially you might not be able to complete whatever activity it is we're doing. So you must make sure you're eating lots. One way of preparing for expeditions may be to widen your palate a little bit by trying lots of different meals. Maybe try things you never had before, even stuff that you have tried before and you don't like, because sometimes on expedition you might have to force yourself to eat a meal that you perhaps don't like that much, but it's really important to eat lots. Wash. So whenever you get the opportunity to on expedition, you should have a shower or have a wash, even if it's in a stream during a trek, because I had it in the past where you've had people not shower for a week or 5 days or whatever, and that can lead to hygiene problems. So whenever you get the opportunity, make sure you are washing. Sun cream. So you'll be going to an environment that you're not used to, your skin is not used to. So it's really important to always make sure you're wearing high factor sun cream, particularly on the areas that get burnt, so like your bridge of your nose, your back of your neck, your shoulders, and to cover up as well when you're in intense sun. Quite sensible to have like a small bottle of high factor sun cream that you can carry around with you all the time. Sleep. So you want to be trying to get a minimum 8 hours sleep a night. The reason is, on expedition often we'll be travelling around, and I know what it's like to be young, be away from home. You want to stay up all night, you want to talk. Well, that's up to you, that's fair enough. But if you're not getting enough sleep each night, then your body won't be recovering, and also you'll become grouchy, you'll become annoyed, and you won't be having as much fun. So where possible, take your opportunity to have a good night's sleep. And if your roommates or your tent mates are keeping you up, then don't be afraid to just say, actually guys, I want to go to sleep now. And if you do really want to stay up and talk, then just make sure that you're not keeping your tent mates or your roommates up when they're wanting to sleep. So just be conscientious of each other. So diarrhea, Delhi belly, Montezuma's revenge, whatever you want to call it, traveller's belly. It's pretty common to get diarrhea when you're travelling. Often it can be just due to a change in diet, or just as often due to some form of bacteria or toxin that you've ingested. So it's not a big deal if you do get the diarrhea on expedition. So let's talk first of all about how you can prevent getting diarrhea. So hygiene is important. So bring along like a small hand gel, like antibacterial hand gel, and always carry that with you. And before you eat, always make sure you're hand gelling, and obviously after you go to the toilet, as well as washing your hands properly. Perhaps at key points on the expedition, particularly before trekking, it's good to avoid the more high-risk food types, such as street meats and maybe street food in general. And look for food that is popular, perhaps stuff that's cooked at a high temperature, stuff that hasn't been washed with the local water. Obviously being careful with not drinking the local water without having purified it first. So even brushing your teeth, make sure you're using your purified water. And if and when you are cooking for yourself, make sure we are following systems that I'll teach you on expedition, and just generally being very careful with hygiene. Okay, so if you do get diarrhea, what is important is that we are managing anyone that's got any illness on expedition. So it's actually quite important that we're open and honest about that sort of thing, even though it might be a little bit embarrassing. Which is why I have a poo scale. So 1 is water, 5 is normal, and 10 is you're not pooed in 3 days. And the idea of this is obviously break down a few social barriers, but also what we don't want is people who might be ill not talking about it, and then the problem becomes worse. So if it is considered bad enough, then I can look into giving you antibiotic treatment. And also what we don't want is you self-treating, and that actually goes for any illness on expedition, just because if you're keeping quiet about your illness, then often, like I say, it can get worse. And particularly with diarrhea, what is so common on expedition is you bring along your lopamide, which is essentially like putting a cork in the problem and making it get a bit worse. Yeah, we might look to give you lopamide before, say, a long bus journey if you did have really bad traveller's diarrhea, but actually, like I say, it can lead to the problem getting worse, because the bacteria is essentially being flushed from your body with the diarrhea. So I think the key message there, though, for now is we need to be open and honest with any problems you might be having, and don't self-medicate. Cool. So moving on. This is more. I'm more just going to talk about snakes and spiders because it's so common for people to say that's one of their fears before expedition. And all I want to say on the matter is really not to worry, because things like snakes, spiders, it's pretty rare that you'll actually see any, and two, it's extremely rare that even if you did, it would be a problem. So really, you're lucky if you do see a snake or a spider. And all I'd say for now on the subject of like snakes, for example, when you're setting up your camp and you're collecting firewood, quite sensible to wear your boots, and if you're picking up firewood, even your gloves, just in case. It's very rare for a venomous snake to actually bite you, and even if it does, it's unlikely to release its venom anyway. Expedition security. This is all about not losing people and not losing belongings. Okay, so let's start with talking about belongings. On expedition, normally you'll have a big expedition rucksack and a day sack. So often you'll be, when you're walking around from transport to hostel or hotel or whatever, you might have your big rucksack on your back and your small rucksack on your front. And then when you stop, you might be putting it down somewhere. When you're on a bus, it might be under the bus, it might be on the roof. Whatever the situation, you need to be aware of where your belongings are. And generally, when you're travelling in less developed countries, it's not a sensible idea to put your bags down and turn your back, because that could be the last you see of them. So how can we prevent losing our stuff? So here's a few ideas. If you're, for example, walking around a busy marketplace, then obviously the chances are that your main bags will probably be in your hotel room. They'll be locked. You've probably left the key with the receptionist, and you might have a day bag. Pretty sensible to just be careful when you're in a really busy marketplace, particularly places where there's lots of tourists, to not be flashing a lot of cash around. And then if you're wearing a bag, if it's really busy and you're particularly worried, it might be sensible to wear your bag on your front. With your money, it's really sensible throughout the whole expedition to have a money belt. This is an example. So the idea of a money belt is you're keeping your passport and the main bulk of your cash in a money belt, preferably in a waterproof freezer bag, Ziploc bag, and this is worn underneath your clothing. And the idea is that you don't go into your money belt during the day, because you got your wallet or your purse or whatever, just with enough cash for that day. So that if in the unlikely situation that you were to get mugged, then obviously you can just hand over your wallet or your purse, and like I say, most of your valuables are in your money belt or your purse, and like I say, most of your valuables are in your money belt. Probably one of my best pieces of advice would be to come with no expectations, but in the real world that's not possible. Even the advice that I'm giving you throughout this video will be setting your expectations. But if you can try your best to keep an open mind, just because I've always found that if you have specific expectations in life, it'll often lead to disappointment. And often the highlights of any trip are often things that you weren't expecting. That said though, it's quite worth researching about your destination. particularly so you can understand the culture. So things that are particularly good to research are the culture, the history, and the language. So really good idea to learn some of the basic phrases such as hello, goodbye, thank you, please, and how much before you get in country. And then when you're actually in country, it's a perfect opportunity to interact with local people and learn the proper pronunciations. And if you just try and learn like one phrase a day, by the end of an expedition, well, you probably have 30 phrases, and you might be able to actually hold a very basic conversation. So I'm going to talk a bit about cultural sensitivities. You're going to travel to a country where the culture is hopefully different to your own. They say that travel broadens the mind and loosens the bowels. Gaining some perspective on how people live their lives differently to yours might give you some perspective on your own life back home. But the last thing you want to do is offend local people, so it's worth bearing a few things in mind. So I'm going to go through a few tips and common things that travellers or tourists might do. So one is photos. So whenever you're taking a photo, put yourself in a local's shoes. You would think it was a bit odd and perhaps a bit rude if a tourist came up to you in your country without asking, just took a photo and then walked off. So the polite thing to do is maybe start up a bit of a conversation with that person or interact with them however you can, and then ask them if they mind you taking a photo of them. Sometimes in some countries people might expect money, particularly in tourist areas, if you're going to take a photo of them, so just bear that in mind. Clothing wise then, depending on where you're going, you might be going to a country that's more reserved than your own, so it might be sensible to cover areas that might offend, such as shoulders, your chest, your legs, and also think about that might send out the wrong message to the opposite member of your sex, or it might just be found offensive. Certain cultures and certain countries, they want people to cover up more, so just bear that in mind. And particularly, if you're visiting a local hill tribe, or if you're going to a particularly religious area. Which brings me on to religion. So it's worth finding out the religion or religions of the country you're going to, and finding out a bit about those religions and a bit about how tourists are expected to act, and just be mindful that in our Western culture we can use statements that might be normal, such as "oh my god" to us, but then to someone else who's particularly religious, it could be deemed as blasphemous and offensive. So just when we're in public places, on a public bus, or when you're doing a community project, or even just interacting with a local guide, you might want to be mindful of your language. Probably the same goes with using swear words, because you might find a fair proportion, depending on what country you're in, of the local people understand English, and therefore if you're using swear words they might get offended. A lot of particularly Asian countries, there's a big culture of family sticking together and respect for elders. So I think it's important, no matter where you are, just to be respectful. I think that comes through with how you're dressing, your actions, and just being polite, really, and friendly to everyone you meet. So that sort of wraps up things I wanted to talk about with cultural sensitivities. I think the main messages there really are just, be thoughtful with your actions, and then I'm sure you won't offend any local people. Moving on then, I wanted to talk a bit about mobile phones, and we always suggest not bringing your mobile phone, and I agree with that, but I wanted to explain the reasons behind it, which there's sort of a few different angles here really. Okay, so the first one being that obviously it's an expensive item that is likely to be a target item from thieves, and if you did lose it, then it's quite time consuming and quite a big hassle to sort that out in terms of getting a police report, insurance claims, etc. And also it's a piece of technology that's quite likely to get broken on an expedition if you're going into the mountains or the jungle or wherever. The other angle is one of the beautiful things about going on expedition is it is a bit of a chance to unplug from all those technologies that serve to distract us day in, day out. Now, that might not sound like a brilliant thing right this minute, but take it from me personally, I really enjoy that. Not having to answer emails every day and answer your phone. And the nice thing is, and what you'll notice is, when we're having a meal or any social situation, you're sat around the table and you're actually communicating with the people around you and you're actually talking to them rather than being distracted. Because when you're looking at your mobile phone, your mind is somewhere else, and you're thinking about another subject. Whereas you're living much more in the moment when you're not distracted by these things. The third reason really is just that it has the potential to worry people back home, because what you'll probably find is most of the time you can't use your phone because maybe you don't have roaming, or maybe it's expensive to make the calls, or maybe your phone just doesn't work in that country, and so your parents might be expecting communication from you because you brought your phone along, and when they don't hear from you, they might start to worry. We carry in-country mobile phones, we carry with in-country SIM cards, we also have a satellite phone and emergency distress beacon. So in terms of communicating to the outside world, if there was a problem on expedition, it's really not a problem. So you really don't need your mobile phone for an emergency situation. So what we tend to tell parents, and what you should tell your own parents, is really no news is good news, because they shouldn't really be expecting to hear from you. And if we are needing to get in contact with them, the chances are that means that something might have gone wrong. So basically what I'm saying is you want to be mindful of not telling your parents not to expect a phone call, but also on a sort of similar but slightly separate note, also mindful of how you're wording messages home, because say you update your Facebook or you sent an email to your parents saying, saw a crocodile and it nearly bit me, you just want to be careful of exaggerations or stuff that might sort of be true, but you're just exaggerating a little bit, because obviously that could worry your parents, because this might be the first time you're away from home, and so I'm not saying don't send your parents messages or your friends or whatever. We'll have opportunities to use the internet when you're in hotels, hostels, whatever, and it's great to update them with your progress, but also bear in mind that if you're feeling down 1 minute on expedition, which can happen, you're not always going to be happy-go-lucky, there might be times where you're missing your parents. Well, that tends to be the time where you start thinking about messaging home, isn't it, when you're missing your parents? And you don't. What I'm saying is you don't really want to worry your parents by saying I'm feeling down, when 5 minutes later you probably feel happy again. So just be mindful of messages that you're sending home, basically. Your expedition really begins the moment you guys meet. And so what I would really like from you guys is to be an organised team before you've even met me, which will obviously mean that you guys need to have decided on your leader rota, decided on your roles, and have a plan of action from the moment you meet. So you might be meeting at the airport, or you might be meeting at the school and then getting a bus to the airport. Either way, regardless, hopefully you know who the leader of the day is, you know who the assistant leader is. They have formulated a plan along with the team, and also you know which role or roles you're doing within the group. I'm sure there'll be group members that have travelled on international flights before, so what I'd really suggest is having a bit of a team meeting to discuss what's going to happen for the day and use your experience within the group to formulate a decent plan. So as I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, probably know, when you're taking a flight, the general process is that you arrive 3 hours before your international flight. You go to the departures and you find your check-in desk for whichever company that you're flying with. You check in, and for that you'll need your passport. And you check in your holdall bag or your expedition rucksack that goes into the plane, and you take your hand luggage onto the plane. So the next step is you go through security, so you've got to make sure you haven't left your sharps and your liquids or anything else that's on the banned list in your hand luggage when you go through security, or your pen knives. And then you'll probably, unless you've had some delays, have a bit of time between going through security and the time in which you're supposed to be boarding the flight. So if you do want to split up in the airport, then just bear in mind that you're on expedition now, so you should be getting into the good habits. So you want to be going to minimum groups of 4, preferably mixed gender groups, and you want to always, whenever we split up, make sure that you have a meeting time and a meeting place, and that everyone knows where that is and when that is. And seeing as it's the start of expedition, might be sensible to just check and synchronise watches. And I'd meet back within good time to get on the plane. But anyway, I'm probably teaching you to suck eggs there, but my main point really is just that this would be an opportunity for your school leaders to take charge, but really what would be really nice is for you guys to be organised, so they don't need to, because the whole point of this expedition is that it is your expedition, so you should be getting yourselves organised. So our first 24 hours in country, you want to be fairly organised, because there will be a lot of things, normally admin sort type tasks, that we need to get squared away. So some of those things normally would include just checking your knowledge on some of the topics that I've been talking about in the video. We'll be formulating a code of conduct. You guys will need to, may need to source in-country mobile phones, SIM cards, and make some contact cards. You probably need to get in contact with the in-country agents. You might need to organise accommodation. Sometimes your first night accommodation is pre-booked, sometimes it isn't. You might need to start organising transport to get to your onward phases, and let's not forget the basics. You probably need to eat, you probably need to drink, you probably need to shower, you probably need to sleep. Yeah, so all this stuff needs to be in your plan for the day, for the first 24 hours. So I'm going to run through the Challenger roles. As part of your youth development program, you will be taking on some responsibility for the running of the expedition. So I'm going to break down each of the roles, and it's really worth listening to all of the roles, even if you already know which ones you're doing, just so you know what's involved with all of the roles. Obviously this only forms part of your development, because during the expedition you'll be learning teamwork, communication, leadership, and all the expedition skills, as well as just travelling, and seeing the world. That is a big development side as well. So let's start with Challenger Leader then. Obviously, throughout the expedition, I'll always be the expedition leader, and therefore I'll always be responsible for the safety and the development of everyone on the expedition. However, each day will have a different Challenger Leader. So one of you guys will be the leader for the day. So you guys should sort out a rota for who's going to be leader when. And the day before your leader, you'll be the assistant leader for that day. And then whoever's leader the next day will be your assistant. So the two of you want to work together. So the idea of a Challenger Leader is that you want to make sure that the day runs smoothly and it is successful. So this will involve making a plan and making decisions. You need to manage your group, and you might need to motivate them. In my opinion, a good leader is honest, humble, committed, confident, funny, communicative, creative, positive, and inspiring. So I've got a few tips for you then. First tip, I suppose, would be to not worry if you're not used to being a leader of a group, because this is really an opportunity for you to learn. I'll be here to help you and to guide you, as well as your teammates, because you're all in this together, and it is a fantastic opportunity. And what's great is it really doesn't matter if you make mistakes, and that's the same for anything on expedition. As long as you learn from those mistakes, I don't mind, and I'm sure no one will. So my tips for being a good leader first one would be, most importantly, plan ahead. So you should know which day you're going to be leader well in advance, so that you can look at the itinerary, look at the budget sheet, and work out what we'll actually be doing on that day. And then what you can do is make sort of a list of what we'll be doing, a list of the things that we need to do. And so you come up with a bit of a skeleton of the plan, and then you just need to consider the who, the how, the what, the where. So you've got to work out who's going to do that stuff, where we're going to be doing it, when we need to do it. So you're working out all the timings for the day. And then obviously you need to inform your team. You need to make sure that everyone understands the plan and isn't in the dark about the general plan and what specifically they'll be doing, and how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, etc. So that no one's left in the dark. But you need to use your team. So you don't want to limit yourself to your own knowledge and experience, because then will be a stagnant dictatorship. So if you use your team by asking them in questions and involving them in the planning stages, then generally that will lead to more effective team management. You might need to encourage your team, especially on physically tough days. You might need to motivate your team. You might need to remind your team, for example, wear sun cream, drink water. Rewarding individuals or your team is, good job, buddy. A good leader will adapt to the situation and to the group needs. So, for example, you might be more democratic in one situation and more autocratic in another. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. We'll be learning more about leadership styles throughout the trip. But if you think about it, let me give you a more specific example. So with unimportant decisions where everyone's going to have a different opinion, it might just be a lot less of a headache for the challenger leader of the day to be a bit more autocratic and just say, actually guys, come on, let's do this. For an important decision that might have a bit of like A or B option, or requires lots of people's ideas in order to formulate the best plan possible, well, that will probably require a lot more of a democratic leadership style, in which you're listening to everyone's ideas and you're coming to some sort of a solution, either choosing one of the ideas or combining those ideas in order to formulate the best plan or decide upon what it is you're going to be doing. Anyway, I think a good challenger leader will generally be quite decisive. They will consult the team, and adult leaders are included within that. You should make sure you're heard. So whenever you're talking as a group, it's quite sensible to get in a circle so that you can see everyone. Make sure everyone's listening. You can ask people to listen if they're not. You can only listen to one person at a time, therefore only one person can be talking at a time, otherwise you're not going to effectively listen. Make sure you're talking clearly, and work with the assistant leader, like I've said already. Make sure you're delegating tasks and you're thinking ahead. And as Expedition develops, I'll be getting the challenger leaders to actually run meetings. So, make sure that you are planning your meeting so that it's organised. Okay, so the transport role. I'd recommend a minimum of 2 people and probably maximum of 4 people within the subgroup of transport. So the idea is that you're obviously going to be responsible for ensuring that the group get where they need to be and when. So to do this, obviously you're going to have to book and organise transport, be it taxis, buses, tuk-tuks, trains, during the course of the expedition. You'll also need to ensure that the group are aware of what the transport plans are, and you obviously need to make sure that you're booking suitable transport. So you want to be asking questions like, have we got enough seats for everyone? And also I'll be teaching you to assess in terms of the risk of that transport. Ultimately that is my responsibility because I'm in charge of safety, but I want you guys to develop in that area as well. So some top tips then. You want to be thinking about booking and organising in advance of most of your transport. And so in order to plan, what you can do is look at the itinerary and more so look at your budget sheet and make a list of when you need to take each transport. So you can make a list that includes the date, where you're going from and to, the budget that you've been given within the budget sheet, and you can convert that into local currency and work out a total figure for the group as well as the figure per person. And then you can start using the guidebook, internet, hotel receptionists, travel agencies, train stations, tourist information places, all of the information that's available to you to research and potentially pre-book your tickets for that transport. Some transport you can just get when you're there. For example, in certain countries it's really easy just to flag down taxis or tuk-tuks, but some transport will need to be pre-booked. So have a chat with me to find out, and as well as looking in the guidebook, what does need to be booked in advance and what we can get away with just organising when we're there. Okay, so let me talk specifically about when we're taking smaller forms of transport such as taxis, tuk-tuks, minibuses, just because there's a few extra things to think about because the team's splitting up. Obviously we don't want to lose team members, so we need to think a bit more about the plan, and a pretty easy thing to avoid happening. So let me go through a few specifics. So firstly, you've got to make sure you've got enough transport, you've ordered enough taxis, because we've got a lot of bags with us. 5 people can't fit in a 5-seater taxi if you've each got your massive expedition rucksacks. So you're probably going to have to only have 4 people in that taxi. So ensure that before anyone's even stepped out of the hotel or hostel or wherever we are, you've discussed with the group so that they know the plan. Yeah, they know which taxi group they're in, so who they're getting in a taxi with, and each of your taxi groups knows the destination. They have a copy of the address to where we're going to, preferably 2 copies actually, in case they lose one or eat one. And even better, also maybe marked on the map where they're going, so that if their taxi driver is confused and starts going the wrong direction, then they'll know that that's the case. You also want to split up communication devices such as in-country mobile phones. We'll split up adult leaders, and we'll split up first aid kits as well. Before anyone departs in their taxi, you want to have got all of the drivers out of the taxis, preferably get all the drivers together, and point to where our destination is on a map, and hand each of the taxi drivers an address. Yeah, and if you're going to a hotel or whatever, it might be worth including the phone number of that hotel also, because sometimes there's multiple hotels with the same name, so there's potential for the taxi driver to get confused and turn up at the incorrect location. It's really good as well to get all the drivers of the taxis to drive together, so they're all following each other in one taxi or tuk-tuk conga line, and maintaining visual contact. That way, one driver's much less likely to get confused and go to the wrong destination. Whenever you get in a taxi, you should have always agreed on a taxi fare before the journey. So you want to have a list of who's in which vehicle, and also make a list for myself so I know who's in each vehicle, so that I can check that you have remembered all of the things that I've just mentioned, and if one of the taxis does end up temporarily going to the wrong place, we know who's in that taxi, and I can probably just give them a call on the in-country phone just to double check they're all right. You'd always do a head count before setting off, to make sure we're not leaving anyone behind, and when we arrive, to make sure we're not leaving anyone on the bus or the taxis or whatever. You also want to be doing a dynamic risk assessment of the roadworthiness of the vehicle. So I appreciate you might not have that much experience to know whether it's safe or not, so I'll be helping you with that. But you can still look at a vehicle without being a mechanic and ask yourselves questions like, are all the tyres inflated? Do they have tread? Does the engine sound normal? Does the driver look tired or intoxicated? At the end of the day, if it doesn't look safe, then we won't take it. So depending on how you are organising your budget, as a transport team, you might be managing your own accounts. Either way, you want to keep track of your expenditure so you can compare it to how much you should be spending within the budget to see whether you're going over or under. So you want to keep an expenditure log regardless, really. But your budget team or you as a group might have decided that the transport subgroup are looking after their own budget and looking after their own money. So if that's the case, then obviously you need to do that as part of your role and keep good accounts. So it's worth also watching and making notes on the section about budgeting within this video. Okay, so I'm going to talk about finance, the budget team. Okay, so you are going to be given all of the funds for your expedition, and essentially how you spend them is up to you. But luckily we have given you a bit of a guide in the form of a budget sheet, so that you don't spend all of your money within the first few days and then be left with nothing, or vice versa, you actually manage to spend all of your money. So the idea is that you're going to be responsible for managing the budget. This can be quite a challenge, and it's a great skill set to possess at the end of it all. So this will involve distributing the money amongst the team, keeping track of your expenditure and adjusting your spending depending on how you're doing money-wise. So some top tips then. Get to know your budget sheet and understand it. So your budget is basically you've got a breakdown of guide amounts for how much you should be spending roughly for each item each day, and then it's up to you to convert that into the local currency depending on the exchange rate. These guides are based on previous expeditions, as well as in-country planning managers doing in-country research. But that said, exchange rates change each year, prices change year upon year, so it is just a guide and your actual spending will be different, but provided you do your best to follow roughly this spending, you shouldn't go too far awry. However, you can spend money differently if you wish to do so. For example, if you want to spend more money on accommodation, then that's up to you. Obviously, if you want to go over the budget, then you will need to find the money from either other areas or personal money. So it is up to you. Okay, so let me break a few things down for you then. So this document probably won't be given to you until your build-up day. Your teachers might be emailed it a few weeks before your expedition. So it's worth knowing what is on here just for your future sort of planning. So it's got the date, the day, where you're going from and to, and then a breakdown from accommodation, food, travel and other, and individual amounts that you'll get given or that you're budgeted for. And often under the other section you can refer to the notes to get some more information about what that actually is. Of course, each exchange rate will be different depending on which vendor you actually go to. A top tip there is to not actually exchange that much money in the airport, because you're not going to get a very good exchange rate. It's better to exchange your money in the towns and ask locals or hotel receptionists or in-country agents where the best place to exchange the money is, or you can calculate whether you're doing well compared to the budget or whether you've overspent, and you can adjust your spending accordingly. So I'm not going to go into loads of detail with the budget sheet now, because we will be helping you quite a bit with the budgeting, because it is quite a complicated task. Once you get your expedition funds, it's going to be pretty sensible to split up the funds to individuals in the group, because obviously if we're putting literally all our eggs in one basket and someone was to lose or have that stolen, then it impact the budget or our money quite significantly. And also you're only insured for a certain amount of money, so it's quite sensible to split the money up. Who gets how much? Well, it's up to you. It doesn't really matter too much, but what is important is that you have kept a track of who has how much. So I like to call that the allocation log. And what's quite good idea when you're splitting up money is to go to a secure place. So that could be a locked hotel room, that could be a quiet corner of the airport, and if you go to some of the money shops, then you might be able to get some little miniature freezer bag type things, which are quite good for keeping your money together, or you could just bring some freezer bags from home, and then a good idea is to write the names of each individual in the group on their bag, so you know whose bag is whose. Whenever you're counting large sums of money, it's quite sensible to double count. So what I would do is split up the piles into piles of separate notes. So all the 20s are together, all the 50s are together, all the 10s are together, and then literally just count how many notes there are, and then make a note of that, pass it to someone else so that someone else is counting, and if you've both counted the same amount, then you can work that out. So say you've counted 60 $10 notes, then you go 60 times 10, and you know you've got $600 in that pile, and then so on and so forth, and then add all your amounts together, and whenever you're calculating, it's always sensible to use a calculator as opposed to trying to do it in your head, because you might make mistakes, and double calculate. So you'll be given an expedition calculator, and you will also have a calculator on your in-country phone. So it's always sensible to double calculate, because you will at times make mistakes with a calculator. So you want to check that you've got the right amount of money that you're supposed to have, and then you're obviously going to want to allocate that money out. Now sometimes groups split it up just to sort of roughly equal amounts. Sometimes groups split it up so that they have a pot of money that's for food, they have a pot of money that's for transport. That's up to you. There are advantages and disadvantages of doing it those certain ways, which I won't delve into right this second, and we'll talk about that on expedition. But what is really important is you do know who has what money. So like I said, I call that allocation log. I've just drawn a draft quick example here. So that, for an allocation log, you'd obviously write the person's name, how much they have, the date, and they're going to sign to say they've received it. And that's also to say that they're going to look after it, they're going to put that in their money belt, they've counted it to check that it's the correct amount, and that they're not going to spend it unless they're told to do so. And also you can sign and date when it's handed back over. That way, hopefully, you're never going to get into a situation where there's money missing and like you're not sure where it is. Okay, so obviously you're going to need to spend the money at times. So who spends that money is up to you. You can have the transport team spending the transport money if you want to, or you can have just a member of the finance team spending the money. That's up to you. You need to decide. What I would recommend though is keeping an accurate log of expenditure, so an expenditure log. That way you know what money has been spent, and you can look back at your log and see where you're underspending, see where you're overspending, and adjust spending specifically depending on that. And also, again, if you ever get into a situation where you think you're missing money, well, you can look back at the log and see if you just made a miscalculation. So I've done, again, like a really quick little draft of what an expenditure log might look like. So I've literally just put down the item, how much it cost, who it was that spent that money, and the date. Yeah, and then you might want to have a separate column for your dollar amount and your local currency amount, and then at the bottom for each day it's going to be worth adding up how much you spent, so you can compare that to the total expenditure for the day, and also you can use that amount to keep track of how much money you actually have left. So I like to call that a totals table. Yeah, so it's just literally a running total of how much money you have left at the end of each day. Yeah, so here's again, it's a really quick draft. So I've just written the date, I've written down the actual funds remaining, and then compared that with the funds remaining in the budget sheet for that day. So in this example I've said I've got $90 remaining, I'm supposed to have 100, so the difference is $10. So in this example, I know that at the end of that day I'm $10 difference. But it's worth bearing in mind that sometimes in your budget sheet you might have specific expenditures that are budgeted for one day, but your actual time that you spend that money might be the next day, or it might be the day before. That's all I'm going to cover for now with the budget. I appreciate there's a lot of info there. Hopefully that just sort of sets you off in the right direction and you're not too worried about it. It's one of the roles where I'll be giving along with maybe some of your school leaders, giving you some more support with, so you don't go too far awry, but I will allow you to make mistakes, because that's how you learn. And also I want to give you the freedom to choose how you are managing your money. Okay, so communication officer or head of communication. This is really just better for one person, just to take charge with sourcing in-country mobile phones, SIM cards and credit, and probably also making calls and contact or emails just to get in contact with in-country agents, trekking providers, R&R providers, or whoever it is. Whether you're actually the person calling to make the booking for the hotel, or the hostels, or transport, is up to you guys. You need to sort that out between you. So a few tips then. Also, it might be worth you putting some extra effort into learning the local language. Perhaps you could also organise sort of teaching a word a day to the group. That'd be really cool. Also, if you can take charge of making contact cards for each individual in the group and making sure they always have their contact card in their money belt. So that's literally just a list of phone numbers to include our in-country mobile phone numbers, my mobile phone number, school leaders' phone numbers if they have their phones with them and are willing to give them out, and in-country agent number, just so that, you know, in the very unlikely situation that you ever did get split up or you need to call someone, you have those numbers always available. Cool, so it's also worth having 1 or 2 people in charge of equipment. So as part of that, you want to divide up group equipment. So you want to spread it out roughly equally between the group, making sure that the group equipment's well maintained and looked after. And it's important that you and I also know who has what group equipment so that it's always available to us. And certain parts of that group equipment need to go to certain people, such as, you know, first aid kits to adult leaders, emergency communication devices to adult leaders, etc. So that's something you probably need to discuss with myself. Challenger medic, normally 1 person, but we could have more. Essentially, the role is just partly you could help out in treating minor medical incidences that I'll train you for, such as, you know, putting on plasters or blister patches. But really, your main sort of role would be in reminding people to use the buddy system, and to drink and to wear sun cream, to take your anti-malarials, to take your personal medication, and also to take an active interest with the welfare of the individuals within the group. And that's quite handy because, you know, sometimes it might be easier for individuals to talk to a peer as opposed to come and chat to me if it's something that's personal. But obviously it's important that we maintain an open dialogue so that I know if there are any medical problems going on within the group. You don't hold the responsibility for any, you know, medical issues. So if there are any serious, you know, medical incidences, which are very unlikely on expedition, but it can happen, then obviously I'll be dealing with that, and I have comprehensive first aid training. So really the role is, it's a good opportunity to learn some sort of basic first aid stuff. So great if you're maybe considering a career in, you know, as a paramedic or a doctor or whatever. So it'd be cool to have 1 or 2 people to be sort of group photographers. They're just probably people with a bit of an artistic eye and preferably a better camera to occasionally set up some group shots, and also, if possible, and depending on what you guys want, they could organise sort of CDs or DVDs or even like USB memory sticks to be made up at the end of the expedition, and we can sort of do a photo sharing thing. Or, you know, if you prefer, we can organise some sort of online photo sharing system. That's up to you guys. You want to talk about that. And organise the best method that works for you. R&R organisers. So the R&R role is essentially to help decide and organise the R&R phase of your expedition. So generally with World Challenge expeditions, there normally isn't anything set in stone for what you do for your R&R, which is great because it gives you the flexibility to decide. But what there will be is several technical activities that have been already risk assessed. So that could be like whitewater rafting, it could be doing some sort of high rope adventure, as well as often there'll be suggestions of monuments, or occasionally there might be a prepaid activity because the school, your school or World Challenge have just suggested it because it's such a common thing to do. For example, seeing the Taj Mahal in Agra in India, and seeing Angkor Wat temples in Cambodia. Otherwise, normally there might not be anything booked. So the idea is that you want to have a look at the R&R forms for the activities that have already been risk assessed, and also have a look at what other options there are. So you can gather information from the guidebook, from internet, from talking to other tourists, from hotel receptions, all this sort of thing. Just bearing in mind that with technical activities, i.e. activities where you probably would need a guide and maybe technical equipment, such as like rock climbing or whitewater rafting, they need to have been pre-risk assessed. So you will have to have gone with providers that risk assessed. So you can't just like walk into any old provider on the street and just say, okay, yeah, we want to go skydiving with these guys or bungee jumping, because as much as I'd love to let you do it, it's not going to happen, which is fair enough really, because obviously in the developing world they don't have quite the same safety standards as the Western world, so we wouldn't want you to go and do a risky activity. But you know, going to see museums, temples, or any non-technical activities, normally that's fine. We just need, you know, I'll do a dynamic risk assessment, which just means that, you know, I'll risk assess it as we go. So anyway, gather information, and obviously this needs to be a group decision as to what activities or sites you go to. And when you're presenting the information you've collected to the group, try to set aside some time to actually do that, and be quite organised in your presentation of the options that you've researched into, and try and display them in a format that is clear, concise, simple. So you're giving the details such as how much it will cost, what the activity will involve, where it is, how long it takes to get there, you know, what's included in the price, how much money is in our budget for R&R activities, and you know, maybe you've fundraised extra money, so how much money you have altogether. And try to be impartial when you're suggesting options. And also, you know, before you've even started your research, it's worth asking the group if there are any activities or sites that the group have already heard about, that they want more information about, or activities that they might enjoy doing. So yeah, so try to not let your personal view on what you want to do affect your research too much, because obviously you know, you are a group, so you do want to come to some sort of decision. And how you decide, you know, it's up to you. You might put it to a group vote, you might have a group discussion, but you will want to decide what you're going to do in good time before, because some activities might need to be pre-booked, some might need to be prepaid, and if you leave it too long, then you might miss out on doing the thing that you want to do. So yeah, you might want to work alongside accommodation and transport and food, because you might require all those things to go and do certain activities. Okay, so the security team, I recommend 2, possibly 3 people at most. So the security team are responsible for making sure that the team are as safe as we can be, in terms of not losing people and not losing possessions. So I did do a separate security or expedition security bit on this video, so if you're in charge of security, it's worth re-watching that and making notes. But essentially, as part of your role, you'll be just trying to always be aware of potential threats, be it lost individuals, pickpockets, road traffic accidents, all these sort of little things that I'll give you training on. And I'll also be teaching you measures in which we can reduce the risk. So in terms of not losing staff then, as part of your role, anytime we leave an area or a bus or after a rest whilst trekking or a campsite or hotel rooms, you'll be doing a security sweep to make sure we're not leaving any belongings. And obviously picking up anything you have left behind and finding out whose it is. You'll also be training the group to not leave stuff behind. So as part of that, I'll even get you to steal temporarily group equipment if an individual's left it lying around, just to highlight the fact that they're doing that and hopefully train them so that it gets them into a good habit. Also pointing out if someone's not wearing their money belt underneath their clothing, or it's on show, or we're in a busy touristy area and you've got some valuables out. Just stuff like that, just to keep the group reminded about good security. You'll also be working with the Challenger leader for that day, just to ensure that whenever the group is splitting up, that you are making sure you've got your minimum group numbers, so minimum of 4, preferably mixed gender, and that everyone has their hotel card, everyone's dressed appropriately in terms of the cultural sensitivities, that they've got their valuables hidden away and secure, and that the team, the group lists of who's in which group are given to both myself and the Challenger leader, so we know who's going where. You might occasionally need to make some form of security rota. Say for example we had to guard our bags whilst we were waiting for some transport and people wanted to go off, then that might be part of your role, just to ensure that there are people who are up for waiting with the bags, or maybe you need to make a time for them to change over. So talking about the food role, which I'd recommend having at least 2 people, but probably no more than 3 people involved with. Okay, so as the food sub-team, your role's all about taking charge of purchasing food and selecting restaurants that the team are going to enjoy eating at. And also you'll be taking charge of sort of the delegation of food preparation if we're cooking for ourselves during the trek. So you want to obviously ensure that any food we buy is going to be suitable for the activity that we're doing, such as like high energy snacks for when we're trekking, and also to the preference of the group. So you want to check for people's preferred food types and if there's any allergies within the group. Also consider like preparation constraints. So if we're cooking using fires or tranches, then certain foods are going to be easier to cook and certain foods are going to be very difficult. So bear that in mind when you're doing your plan for your shopping. So a few other top tips then. You want to look at your budget using the budget sheet, and the first thing I would do as a food team is write that out into your own notebooks and convert it from the US dollars per person per day, and then work out what you're going to spend for each meal time. So you might split that up into breakfast, lunch, snacks and dinner. And then convert that into local currency, and again convert that into local currency total amount for the group. So you know that, say for example, we go to a restaurant for breakfast, you will know the per person amount that you're budgeted for, and you can adjust that to whatever you want, and you'll know you'll know what the total amount will be. So if the bill, you can compare that straight with the bill at the end. So with eating in restaurants, things I'm talking about that subject, it's normally worth wherever possible, and unless we just arrived, actually doing a bit of research, asking other people, asking hotel receptionists, other tourists, locals, where a good spot is to eat, and then going and checking it out, and maybe making a reservation, because it will obviously be quite a large group. Some restaurants aren't able to handle that amount of people without a reservation. And just check it out in terms of suitability. So you're looking for a restaurant that's big enough to fit us, and have where possible look at the food as well, and look at the quality of the food, and obviously the price of the food, and make sure that it matches in terms of the budget, in terms of avoiding sort of high risk foods, and within the budget. Normally in most countries you can eat fairly well, so you don't have to skimp too much, just because it's not the most fun thing for the group to wander around for hours looking for a suitable restaurant. That said though, I'm all about being a bit spontaneous, so when we're in a town that has lots of options, it can be quite nice to just wander around. But maybe talk to your team and find out what they prefer to do. I definitely think be decisive if you are walking around, because the group will get annoyed if we're walking around for more than half an hour when you're hungry. Anyway, so whether you're looking after your own money for purchasing food, or whether the finance team look after the money, is up to you guys. You need to decide that. But just like all the subgroups, you want to keep a good record of your expenditure, so you can compare that to see if we're overspending, underspending, and you can talk with the group as to whether you want to spend more or less on food. The food budget isn't set to cover bottled drinks and bottled water, because you've got your purification for tap water. So if you want to drink your fizzy cans of Coke and stuff, then that's it's going to tip us over in terms of our spending, more than likely. So you should discuss that with the group, make sure everyone's aware of that. Some people might be able to afford that because they're not spending so much on a meal if they're getting a cheaper meal, but normally that would come out of personal money. So the idea is, when we're eating in a restaurant, normally you'll set a budget. So say it could be 70 rupees or whatever, and then individuals can spend whatever they want. They can have whatever they want, but then if they're going over your set budget, then they chip in from personal money for the extra amount. And it's quite good to work in buddies with the person you sat next to in the restaurant, just so you can check for mistakes and honesty. Okay, so when you're purchasing food, obviously you're probably going to be shopping for a large amount of people for a number of days and quite a number of meals. So that can be quite a daunting prospect. So it's important to not just turn up at the supermarket without a plan and without a detailed shopping list. So in order to come up with a detailed shopping list, you need to first of all have talked to the group and worked out what kind of meals they would enjoy, and what kind of snacks they would like, and then make a meal plan. So you're literally writing out what you'll have for breakfast each day, what you have for lunch each day, and then working out a shopping list from that based on how many grams of pasta that one person might eat. Yeah, so say you wanted to cook 3 pasta meals for 10 people, and off the top of my head, I know, say one person might eat 30 to 40 grams of pasta, then you need to do the maths and work out how much that totals so that you can buy the correct amount, and you can stick to that when you're actually cooking. 1 or 2 people to take charge of the navigation role. The idea obviously being that you're going to be sourcing maps for our treks, and also for when we're needing to find places around towns and cities. It can be quite difficult sometimes to find maps for the treks because we're trekking in remote areas. Sometimes these maps aren't sold in the shops, so it's always worth doing a bit of research in advance using the internet to find out what maps are available for the areas that we'll be trekking in. So don't stress out if you can't find what maps we need. We can always look into it when we're on expedition. But what I'm saying is obviously you want to think about that in advance. So for when you're navigating around towns and cities, there'll often be a map in the guidebook, and you can more often than not get maps from hotel receptionists and tourist informations. Obviously this role would be suitable for people that enjoy navigating, but it's worth pointing out that the idea isn't that you're always going to be the navigators, so you want to also find other people within the group that want to help navigate, and you can sort of maybe work out a route or a system and decide who's going to navigate and when. As well as perhaps teaching some navigation tips, and of course that's something where I'll come in and teach navigating skills. So that concludes the section on the roles. If you have any further questions, feel free to put up a message on Team Talk, or you can just email me directly. But you will obviously be getting more training and assistance during the expedition, so don't worry too much if there's specific aspects that you are unsure about that I've been talking about, because I will be helping you during the trip. And don't worry too much about doing lots of organisation pre-expedition, because most of it can be done during the expedition itself. It's really good though to do some research, so it's mainly about doing research before the expedition. You don't really need to book anything or pay for any. Definitely don't